During Advent, we Christians spend quite a lot of time reflecting on Jesus and who he is and what he means to us. But sometimes we forget that Jesus also means something else to other faiths. Perhaps the faith that includes Jesus in its theology and its outlook more than any other is that of Islam. Jesus has a special status within Islam, and he's actually mentioned 25 times in the Quran, and his mother Mary is mentioned 34 times, more than in the Gospels, in fact. And she is the only woman in the Quran to have a chapter dedicated to her. The Quran tells the story of Jesus' conception, of how the angel Gabriel comes to Mary. But the birth story is a bit different from ours. The birth of Jesus takes place in a remote desert, and Mary is alone, and she is under a palm tree. And the need for water and for drink, and so a stream appears miraculously to help her as she gives birth to Jesus. As a baby, Jesus miraculously speaks to defend his mother's honour and to proclaim his status as a prophet of God. Now, it's not the same as our story, but the important point of these stories is not to work out what happened, which one is right. Rather, it's to ask, what meaning is there in these stories, and what do they tell us about Jesus? For Muslims, Jesus is a prophet, one of the 5 great messengers of God. And in the Quran, God encourages the Prophet Muhammad to take inspiration from Jesus, as he too was persecuted for his faith, like Muhammad. The Quran tells us that his admirable virtues are universal guidelines for all people to learn from and to practice. Jesus is recognized as the Messiah, the Anointed One, who came from God and brought the gospel to humanity. He's seen as a preacher and a miracle worker, and was rejected by the Jewish authorities. But in contrast to the Christian story, he is stated neither to have been crucified nor executed. He was raised alive into heaven, from where he will return at the end of time, with the Mahdi, a messianic figure who will restore justice, defeat evil, and lead the world into a golden age. For Jews, Jesus is neither a prophet or a Messiah or the Son of God. Rather, he was born, lived, and died a Jew, as did his early followers. Jewish worship, ethics, and practice shaped Jesus' life and teaching. The scriptures of his people inspired and nurtured him. According to the earliest resources, he did not intend to establish a new religion. Rather, he preached a way of living the Jewish Torah, and through his followers and Christianity, brought the world to a knowledge of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Unfortunately, for centuries, the name of Jesus was synonymous with Christian anti-Semitism and the charge of deicide. Now, there is a much more open approach to both Christianity and the person of Jesus since the promulgation of the Vatican II document, Nostra Aetate, which states clearly that Jesus, his mother, and the apostles were all Jewish. that the Jews cannot be held responsible for the death of Jesus, and that anti-Semitism is a sin and must be rejected. In the year 2000, an interdenominational group of Jewish scholars issued a statement called Dabru Emet, which means speak truth. It was signed by over 200 rabbis and scholars. And one of the things it said was that Jews and Christians worship the same God. Before the rise of Christianity, Jews were the only worshippers of the God of Israel. But Christians also worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the creator of heaven and earth. While Christian worship is not a viable religious choice for Jews, as Jewish theologians we rejoice that through Christianity, hundreds of millions of people have entered into a relationship with the God of Israel. Hindus too have a respect for Jesus. Hinduism is a very diverse religion. It goes straight back to from the 12th to the 6th century before Christ. It has no single founder. But for Hindus, Jesus was a holy man, a wise teacher, even an expression of the divine. Mahatma Gandhi, for example, really admired the teaching of Jesus and would read the Sermon on the Mount constantly. But while Jesus could be considered a manifestation of divinity, he is not unique in this. Buddhism also would have a place for Jesus. Buddhism doesn't have a singular, unified view about Jesus, although a number of Jesus' characteristics are respected by many Buddhists. For them, Jesus was an enlightened man, a wise teacher, a holy man. Some Buddhists, including the Dalai Lama, have even recognized Jesus as a bodhisattva, one who vows not to leave the round of rebirth and enter into the peace of nirvana, but who continues in this round of rebirth, living a life of compassion and love until all sentient beings are saved. Thich Nhat Hanh has a book that looks upon Jesus and the Buddha as brothers. He reminds us that people will get to know Jesus and form an understanding of him through their relationship with Christians. So let's just give Thich Nhat Hanh the last word in this short reflection. He writes, "On the altar in my hermitage in France are images of Buddha and Jesus, and every time I light incense, I touch both of them as my spiritual ancestors. I can do this because of contact through friendship with real Christians like Martin Luther King, who truly embody the spirit of understanding and compassion of Jesus. When you touch someone who authentically represents a tradition, you not only touch his or her tradition, you also touch your own. This quality is essential for dialogue. When participants are willing to learn from each other, dialogue takes place just by their being together. When those who represent a spiritual tradition embody the essence of their tradition, just the way they walk, sit, and smile speaks volumes about the tradition."